All right. Everyone, I am here with Whitney Bryson. With Whitney Bryson. I'm sorry. I am here with Whitney Bryson today. And what is the name of your farm?
Sweetwater Southern Farmstead.
Sweetwater Southern Farmstead. We are here in North Augusta, South Carolina. And I am purchasing a new breeding board from Whitney here. And she has been kind enough to agree to let me interview her and see what her process is for establishing her herd and what she looks for in a pig, to give y'all a better idea of what you might be looking for in a pig. So. Whitney, I had questions. So what was it about the Kunekunes that made you decide? You said you were researching them for like 10 years.
I did. So my husband and I, we knew we always wanted to have a farm. Mm-hmm. And so we had a lot of time to think about it because we didn't want to be in a lot of debt. So first thing was finding land and then paying our land off before we built our home.
You got some nice land here.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And so during that time, I kind of kept the notebook of what I wanted. When I got out here, I knew I wanted some pigs and some goats and some chickens, the basics. And I'll be honest with you, what first drew me to Coonies was I was just searching the web one day for pigs, and a picture of them popped up. And I mean, you can't deny it. They're cute. They're cute. I once read someone said if Walt Disney had wanted a character as a pig, he'd have drawn a Coonie.
They have one.
Really?
Moana.
Okay. Well, there you go.
The pig in Moana is a Kunekune. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense.
It took a little while, but they got it. Yeah.
But they're just cute. Mm-hmm. But then the more I read about them, they were a perfect fit for us because they don't root. I mean, when they do, it's very minimal, and it's usually after excessive rain. Yeah. So they don't tear up our land. They just turn up the top layer, which helps us rejuvenate it, which is great because a couple of days before we move them, they've lightly turned up the soil. We go in and we backseed it. They stomp it in, and then the next 2 days later, we move them on to the next section. Then we turn the chickens out on that. They break up the manure, it fertilizes it, and then it comes back the most lush hay you've ever seen. So,
I see you've got rotational patches, so this is all electrified?
It is, yes, it sure is.
I've seen a lot of people using this.
It's worked very well for us.
Yeah.
When we first moved out here, this had been a cattle farm for probably 50 years, and the land, it needed some rejuvenating. And so between the goats and the pigs and the chickens, it's really starting to turn around and come back for us. Awesome. But that was a key factor, that they wouldn't tear things up. And probably the biggest factor for me was their docile nature.
Yeah,
we have children. I didn't want to have to worry about them getting hurt. I didn't want to have to worry that if I walk inside for a minute and my little one jumps in the pen that she's going to get hurt. Even my boars, my kids go in there and I have zero fear of them getting in there. They're gentle natured animals.
That was my biggest concern with pigs. I prefer more of a free range.
Yeah.
Like I got my chickens are free range. My goats can't be because they jump on the cars. But I try to just give them as much space as possible.
Right.
And we also have small children. And that was my biggest concern, is like I need something docile, and this is the pig that have docile.
They don't get huge. I mean,
they don't get huge.
Your average female's 150, 175 pounds. Your average male's 22 and 250. I mean, it sounds bigger than it is because they're short and they're compact, but they're easy to manage. They're all really intelligent. They all know their names. They're kind of like dogs. I can call them when I move them. I don't even try to pin them up. I just open it up. They run around while I'm setting the net back up, and then I just call them back in, and they come.
Look at the snout on that guy. Hi.
That's honeysuckle.
That's honeysuckle. Hi, honeysuckle. You got a beautiful nose. All right, what's the next? I wrote them all down. All right. Okay, so what are your goals for your herd as far as are you producing for meat? Are you just breeding for pets? What are you doing for?
So we kind of do a little bit of everything. For as far as I'm concerned, I do use barrows to grow out for meat, so we do eat them. And we have some people that want to purchase a barrow. again, with their size, it's perfect because not everybody wants 600 pounds of meat in their refrigerator or freezer at one time. So it's great because you can get them to, they are slower to mature than your average pig, but the meat is just phenomenal. It's a red marbled meat, much like beef. And so there's something to be said for waiting on that to mature.
I think a big part of their docile nature is because they're so slow growing as well. They're not just so aggressive for food all the time. I honestly think that's a big part of getting the heritage breed and having that extended time. If you're hungry all the time, you're going to be, a bit of a bitch about it.
Right.
You're going to get angry.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're not. I mean, they like to eat. They get excited when we come out with fresh vegetables, but nobody fights over it. In fact, mine are trained to sit, so they'll sit and let me individually hand them out.
That was smart. I did not do that with mine.
But yes, so when I have an unwaddled boarling or one that maybe has an umbilical hernia or just not strong pasterns, if I deem it not to be of good breeding quality, then I'll go ahead and raise those up for food later on.
You got a lot of pigs here, so.
We do. We have a good bit. The other thing, we have a lot of people that come that want to get into 4-H or the EKPA showing, that get into that. So I have several that are, out of some fancier bloodlines as far as showing and stuff like that. They have champion bloodlines in them, and so they tend to turn out real nice for those type of purposes. And then we have some people that just want a pet, and usually if I'm going to sell a pet, it's a barrow because I do not sell any unregistered pigs that are still intact.
Right.
So.
No, that's good. Beautiful setup you got here.
Thank you.
All right. I did not memorize these at all. All right. So what is your number one most important consideration when you're considering a new breeding animal for a Kunekune?
Okay, so for me, it's definitely genealogy.
Okay.
So I'm a pharmacist by trade.
Oh,
okay,
nice.
So I got a heavy biology background, obviously, but I love genetics.
Me too. Just a bachelor's, but yeah.
Okay, cool.
You went for like 20 more years in school than I did.
But so for me, that's a big part of it. And like I told you, I spent like 10 years researching these guys before I got into it.
So they got a lot more popular just in that 10 year.
They did.
You had your eye on them.
Yes.
Because it was what, the 1970s when it was
when they were first discovered.
When those 17 individuals were there two guys.
Okay, so the history on coonies is there were a couple of British explorers, John Simister and Michael Willis, and they were in New Zealand. They both had conservancy, and they had seen them, and they were like, "Oh, where can I get them?" And they would go around after, we'll just send them up the road a little further, Well, go ask Joe up the road.
2 look down the road, yeah.
So, long story short, they found them living with a Maori tribe. After making a couple of laps around the whole island of New Zealand, they were able to determine there were only about 50 of them left in existence. And in the beginning, the Maori people didn't want to give them to them because they deemed those their pigs. They were, special to them. But they eventually befriended them and convinced them to give them some. They would go and get a couple each time. They ended up with a total of 18 that was comprised of 3 different boar lines and 6 different sow lines in the beginning. So everything that you see now is from those original 18. And that was back in the 70s. Well, in the early 90s, they got to talking and they were like, what if they catch something and disease spreads from? We'll lose them all. So in the early 90s, the first ones were sent out to UK so that they could disperse some and try to make sure nothing like that ever happened.
There's a lot of thought that went into protecting this breed.
Yes.
We owe a lot to these people for doing this. Talk about something to leave behind, a legacy.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
And in the late 90s, early 2000s were when the first ones were brought into the U.S. and Canada.
Okay, I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yep.
Awesome.
So.
And one of the big selling points for the boar I'm getting today is his sire, his father, was brought over from UK. So he's one of the ones who was sent away and was now brought back over. And this boar is a first generation.
That's right.
So those genetics have been far flung for a good long time, have now come back. And so we've got a lot of new, fresh mutations, just, fresh. You send them away long enough, they come back, they're fresh again.
That's right, that's right.
But
that's why it's so important when you think, because you're already starting with a narrow gene pool. So when you're starting up your herd, I always tell people, try to start out as diverse as possible. Give yourself room to grow as you go. If you can get, if you're picking up 2 boars and 2 sows, make sure they all come from different boar and sow lines, and go back further than just the parents, because you may think you are, but then when you start looking on the family tree, it may be that they share the same grandparents, even though they come with a different sow or boar line name.
And that's one of the benefits of going with registered stock, because the registered websites have this nice tool called a trial breeding.
Yep, the COI,
the COI, coefficient of inbreeding, and you can put in the registration numbers of these pigs, and you can do a trial breeding to see what shared relations are in those pigs and how far back they go, and you get a number, a coefficient of inbreeding.
That's right.
And the lower that coefficient of inbreeding, the less inbreeding the animal has. So that's a very good tool to have.
And it's great, because before that was on the websites, I used to hand draw those out to try to figure it out. I mean, I would be sitting on vacation at the table in our camper.
You are hardcore.
Drawing them out.
You are hardcore. That is awesome. Okay, Okay, if you could go back in time when you were first setting up your herd, what advice would you give yourself? And it kind of sounds like you already did your research and you already had the advice.
Well, yes, and so, honestly, to answer that question, I thought about it, and there's not a whole lot I would change, because
you spent 10 years.
I did. I had a lot of time on my hands to do all my background homework. I knew what I wanted by the time I actually began to purchase the animals. And the biggest, thing for me is just have fun with it, because, I mean, at the end of the day, if you don't like the way one turns out, you can always make barbecue.
That's nice.
So you really can't go wrong. For me, it's fun. It is my passion. When you first asked me to talk, I was a little nervous, but then I thought, wow, Whitney, if you just open up and talk, just let it free flow, because this is what I love. When I'm out here in these fields, it's where I find peace. I feel the closest to God when I'm working with these animals.
I believe it. They're wonderful.
Well, thank you. But I would say biggest things I will say that I have done that I would do over and over and over again are make sure you find good, reputable breeders that you're getting them from. Make sure they are the kind of people that are going to stick with you as a lifelong mentor, because I still pick up my phone on a regular basis and call some that have been doing it way longer than I have. There's been multiple times over the years when I need advice. Have you ever seen this? And when I call them, I mean, I have one mentor that I call, and she's been in it for, Lord have mercy, since they started really in the U.S. And she said, well, I haven't, but hold on, I know somebody that might have, and she'll call them and then call me back. I mean, it's, you got to have that network with them.
One thing I've noticed with anyone who raises any sort of heritage breed, they all stick together.
They do.
They're
really
do. There with you.
And they're good people.
They're good people.
I mean, I tell you, like it's just quality people. I feel like, I enjoy talking with people that come and buy animals from me. Not just coonies, but the pigs and the chickens as well. And I mean, I truly do stay in contact with people that have bought animals from me, and I would dare to say that 90% of them are now my friends. I mean, you get to know people from all over. It's great.
I've had the same experience. I'm still friends, and we Facebook Messenger.
Yeah.
People I've bought goats from, people I've bought pigs from. I'm now mentoring people who are just 2 years away from me. I've only been in pigs for 2 years, but I'm 2 years ahead of them. So
that's awesome.
It passes on, and
that's great.
It's a whole community. It
exactly.
Really is. It really is.
Exactly.
All right, last question.
Okay.
So how do you feel your unique farm or family impacts your goals for your herd?
Well, for me, it's probably more of my family impacting it. Again, I would say that kind of goes back to me wanting to know that my children can be out here, and if somebody gets out of a paddock, there's no fear, nothing to worry about.
Pause 1 second, make sure this is still running. It's on a 20-minute timer, so I want to make sure. We're still recording. Very good. Okay.
That's good.
Sometimes it messes with me.
No, that's fine.
So your children, so they can get out here.
Yeah, definitely the biggest thing for me is knowing that I always tell people I have no room for mean animals on my farm. Yeah. If you're not sweet, you got to go. So for me, that's probably the number one factor, is knowing that my children can be out here and I feel safe, whether it be a boar, a sow, a mama having babies. One of my sows up here, My 8-year-old sat through the entire farrowing process with me, and you know, my sow was perfectly content. If anything, I would dare to say she wanted us in there with her. So, you know, that's a really comforting side of it to me, to know that my children can enjoy this with me, they can learn with me, and I can feel like they're safe doing it with me.
One of the things that shocked my brother-in-law about these pigs, he would not believe that a newly postpartum mom would let you anywhere near the piglet. He grew up with pigs.
Yeah.
He grew up, you know, raising pigs. He's like, there's no way. I'm like, yeah, way.
Yeah.
He's like, no way. I'm like, yeah, way. And he could not get his head wrapped around a pig.
They're proud of their babies. I told my husband this morning, Clarabelle up here, she had a litter of piglets a couple weeks ago, and I was outside last night and I was talking to her, and she came up to the edge of the fence line, and she started calling to her babies, and they all came running out of the farrowing hut, because we farrow completely on pasture. Yes, and but I told him it was so obvious that she wanted to show her babies to me, because she got this far from the electric fence, and all her babies were behind her, and she rolled that way to force them to come around so that I could look down on them. You know
what I did.
Exactly, exactly. Of course, I told her how pretty they were.
Natural. Yeah, she did a good job.
That's right.
So who's this?
This is Clarabelle.
Clarabelle.
This is the one I was telling you about that likes to show me her piglets. She's about as sweet as they come.
Yep, I like the little tykes pool.
Yeah.
And then we got the farrowing pen over here, all mobile.
That's right.
In the pen.
Yep, I build those myself.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Awesome. That's a good search. Beautiful.
This is Lucy.
This is Lucy.
Her
Is
babies
she?
must be inside the farrowing hut.
All right. Hey,
This
Lucy. Hello.
is Trixie. Her baby's
Oh,
taking a nap too.
that's a beautiful looking pig. Look at that top line.
Little
Hello.
babies. Little babies. Let's see if they'll come out.
Yeah, next step here, they're gonna get the garden going in our place in town. I have a garden, we had them there.
They're like, ah, we're napping.
Taking them a good long nap.
Well, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Good luck in Maine.
Thank you very much.